In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Don't be shy.
Aliens communicate in and out of the body. They're like little chatty Cathy dolls.
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you about this one time when I invented a time machine by accident?
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
So the Jeffrey.
So the Jer.
Here we are again.
Yes, here we are.
You know, some listeners from our message board asked if, they suggested really that we maybe do a segment where we look at the UFO news and discuss it at the beginning or the end of an episode. And that sounded good to me until I realized there's no UFO news. Actually,
well, actually, there is. I mean, there's some out around the net. You got to do the Google alerts. So you just type UFO in the Google alerts, and of course, you'll get everything from the rock band UFO to UFO news.
Well, why don't they just do it, and then they don't need us to talk about it?
Doctor, please. Yeah.
Is there anything from around the world of ufology that you want to talk about?
Not that I can think of right off the top of my head. I would have to open my Google alerts and look at them, and I've deleted them all from my mail today.
Great.
Moving on.
Paratopia, please welcome our very special guest, Chris Leask. He is a gentleman I met at the Harvard gathering that I've spoken about on various episodes. He is an experiencer of some strange stuff, I'll say, and I believe he worked on free energy devices. Chris, that would be my Stephen Greer impression, by the way. Chris, thank you for coming on the show to talk about your wild, wacky life.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
So, where do we begin? Are you an abductee? Are you an experiencer? What's
experiencer and not an abductee, although my father had missing time, my cousin does, and her daughters had all kinds of experiences with abductions, but I have no memory whatsoever of abduction.
So you're saying you're in denial? That's
No, I'm not in denial. If I had the experience, I'd tell you. I just don't have the memory if it happened.
So what are you an experiencer of?
A lot of strange things. I mean, it started in high school. I started having out-of-body experiences several times a week, and they were very scary for me because I had, this is in the 60s. I'm pretty old, so there was no public knowledge about out-of-body experience. There was no public knowledge about any out-of-body experience of meeting beings or anything like that, and so I usually my out-of-body experience consisted of finding myself out of my body in my bed and then struggling to get back in sheer terror. And I didn't know what put me out of the body. I still don't know why that happened, but it happened an awful lot.
Would you say that an out-of-body experience... I've heard two things. One is that obviously it's out of the body. Another is that it's sort of a visionary state where you think you're out of your body, but you're sort of non-local or something. You're sort of in your body, but you can see out your body. Would you say that you were outside of your body?
It was hard to tell because I was always afraid to look at my body. But generally, I was. It was like you say. I could see, I could hear sounds in the room, although they weren't normal sounds. They were sort of hollow, non-local sounds. I couldn't really tell where they were coming from generally. But I could see, even though knew my eyes were closed, I could still see the wall, I could see the bed, I could see the things in my room, and that brought up one of the scariest things. Episodes was it always seemed to happen around 3 a.m, and I heard this somebody coming up the stairs. I was on the second floor in the back of the house. This was actually in Darien, Connecticut. It's right near New York City there. Mm-hmm. And no, actually, this is after Darien. Let's see. This is in Massachusetts. Yeah, after we moved, just after that. Anyway, so I heard the footsteps coming up, and I thought maybe it was my mother or father or something coming up. Mm-hmm. And but it came into my room. The door opened, and it got into my bed. I felt the bed go down, and this arm came around my head, and it was all green with scales and had a claw instead of fingernails, it had claws. And that was really quite scary. I mean, I had never heard of any kind of reptilian being before, and here was one in my bed.
Well, wait a second. When did you... I'm confused. Did you see the being actually come in and get into the bed?
No, I was facing away from it. So I was facing the wall. So I heard it come in the room. Mm-hmm. I felt the bed as it got into the bed. And then its arm came around between me and the wall, and then I could see it. So I saw the arm from the elbow to the fingernails. And that was enough. I didn't want to see the rest of it. So...
Did it say anything or communicate anything?
No. And then I got the distinct impression that it was almost like a parallel reality. I wasn't even sure whether that being was aware that I was there. Some of the thoughts that came into my mind that it may have been me in another parallel universe, but maybe not. Maybe I've also had the thought maybe it was, they talk about the reptilians sort of monitoring humans, and so maybe that was part of some kind of monitoring process, but it was clearly not exactly on this physical level because I struggled to get back in my body, and when I did, it wasn't there. And it certainly was not a dream state. I know that. And this is, skeptics always say, oh, you were dreaming, but there's a distinct difference. In these states of out of body, you're conscious, you make decisions, you're aware, you have memory. There's no doubt it's an awake, aware state. And it's I don't even listen to people who say that anymore because it's such a real experience. Mm-hmm. And
well, let me ask you something. You have an experience like that, and then you must read about reptilians. And
I didn't read about reptilians till probably the 1990s.
Okay, so eventually you read about reptilians.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, in anything that you've read, have you seen anything, not that appeals to you emotionally or personally, but that actually reflects any of the experiences you've had with them? Yeah,
well, actually, that particular experience, I had a friend who grew up in Westport, Connecticut, and she told me, after I told her that experience, she told me she had the exact same experience. She saw a reptilian being, came in her room, got into bed, exactly the same as mine. And so I thought that was curious. So that's a direct parallel to my experience. I have read of other people who have had encounters with reptilians. I felt no negative energy, no no aggressive energy coming from the being. Mm-hmm. And I've read there's all kinds of different reptilian races. There's not just one. So,
Chris, can I ask?
Huh?
I'm sorry. Can I ask the physicality of the arm and the hand? What was that like? Are we talking about 5 fingers like us, fingernails in the same place?
5 fingers, scales, definitely green.
Very fine scales or bigger scales?
I'd say maybe between a 16th of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch. Probably closer to 1/16th of an inch.
Okay.
And of course, the remarkable thing was the fingernails were really, they were like claws. But other than that, the hand was very human.
Okay.
And that I've read also, that most reptilians have claw-like fingernails. Mm-hmm. I read that, of course, much later. But
any other experiences with reptilians?
No, that's the only one with a reptilian. I had another experience.
Well, wait, can I ask you how that ended?
Yeah. When I got in my body, it was gone.
So you got scared. What's the process of getting back into your body? What happens?
Struggling to try and enter my body and make the muscles move.
So your awareness is outside your body.
Yeah.
You can see your room.
I can see the room.
And do you have to concentrate on something to get back in your body?
I concentrate on my body.
Okay. And then that pulls you back into normal.
Eventually it pulls me back. Sometimes it takes a while, but...
And do you see, like, when you go into your body, do you see the inside, the interior of your body, or is it just sort of, boom, there you are, back in your body?
No, boom, I'm there, and then my eyes open, and I'm generally looking at the same part of the room, but... But I had a series of experiences. One of the strangest ones was I looked out the window, and I woke up in the middle of the night, looked out the window, and there was this rectangular shape. It looked like maybe 18 inches long, maybe 3 inches wide, almost like a 2x4 kind of thing, but it was floating outside the window. There was enough light outside I could see it. And so I said, okay, this is I was not out of my body. This was in my body experience. So I decided I'm going to do a scientific analysis of this thing. I'm going to, I turned on the lights. I could still see it outside the window. I looked for reflection. Is this a reflection? No. I just tried every possible way to rule out anything, but it was still floating outside my window. And I ended up sleeping in the bathtub that night because I was so freaked out. So something was monitoring me on the outside of my window. And in the morning I went and it was gone. It wasn't there.
Any communication with that?
No, none whatsoever. I don't even know what it was.
Was it hard-edged, Chris, the edges of it? Were they solid edges on it?
Yeah, but not, they're kind of rounded.
Okay. But it was a pretty well-defined shape. It wasn't fuzzy or out.
Shape, but it was not giving off any light, but yet I could see it. So,
okay.
This is one of the neatest experiences I had. Was, okay, I woke up in the night, totally, in my body, totally awake. And my bed at that time, my bed moved around at various times. This time was away from the window, so I had this desire to go look out the window. It was a full moon night, and the backyard went out towards a pine forest, which went on for several miles. There was nothing in back of us. And so the window was closed. I looked out the window. I was on the second floor, and there was nothing below me for 2 floors until you hit the ground. There was no ledges, no nothing. And this large white object just took off from just below the window. As soon as I looked out the window, it took off. It looked like a bird. In other words, it had like a wingspan. It was white. I could see the moonlight reflecting off it. But, it didn't have the detail of a bird. It didn't have a tail like a bird. And it didn't flap its wings. And it just took off across the yard, went off into the woods among the trees until I couldn't see it anymore. So it probably went about 300 feet, didn't flap its wings, didn't descend at all, and then just disappeared. I have no idea what that was. Some kind of monitoring something or other.
Jeff, didn't you see something like that at your old condo?
Well, I saw an object that appeared to, I don't know, it was hovering. It was a ball with essentially what looked like appendages on it that were thin and I guess rectangular to a certain point, but they were almost like a narrower towards the body of this ball. And it was hovering, but it was bobbing up and down rather, I don't know, artificially, and it was flapping these these appendages like I'm flying, I'm a bird. I'm like, you're not a bird. I don't know what the hell you are. And I bolted inside the house, but I mean, it was so close I could have put my hands on it.
Yeah, well, this was literally when I first saw it. It was probably 2 feet in front of me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's exactly about the. It was just shy over the railing of the balcony,
right?
And it just, I don't know, put me in mind of, yeah, they're dumb. They'll think it's a bird. I'm like, no, that's a new bird. I don't know what the hell that is.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I thought. I said, well, it looks like a bird, but birds are supposed to flap their wings, and they're supposed to sit on something. There's nothing to sit on under the windows.
Right.
So even at the time, I said, well, it's got to be hovering, but birds can't hover.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's what I was going through at that time. That was another night. I spent the night in the bathroom with the lights on.
I don't blame you.
I spent quite a few in the bathroom.
For different reasons.
Yeah, right.
Nobody needs to hear that.
Oh, sorry. So is it a coincidence then that you ended up working on free energy?
I don't know if it's a coincidence. I just spontaneously around 1985, I started really getting the desire to work on free energy. I was convinced it existed, and there was nothing I read that said it existed. I just felt it did, and I don't know why. I guess I became convinced that the universe is structured such that it's psychically generated. In other words, if you accept the existence of the psychic, then the physical must be a result of the psychic, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. And if you accept that, then literally you're only limited by what you can think. So I thought, well, if I can think that there's a free source of energy, there must be one. That's literally the reasoning I went through.
What is your profession? What is your
mechanical engineer?
Mechanical engineer.
Yeah, and electrical, a little bit electrical, mostly mechanical.
And how did you end up getting hooked up with John Mack or that group?
Well, that was a long story. I mean, when I got into alternate energy, I went through a whole series of people. I was convinced that I started hearing around 1989. I started hearing about abductees and things like people like that, experiences like that, and so I got in touch with Joe Nyman, who was an abductee researcher in Massachusetts. He used to do hypnosis and etc. And I asked him if he knew of any of his, the people who had come to see him who he had done hypnosis on, whether they had had any technology. So he invited me to sit in on one of his, a woman he was in the process of hypnotizing and hearing her story, and I sat in on a whole bunch of sessions, and then he got a call from Bud Hopkins, and Bud Hopkins told him that there was a friend of his, a person who had come to see him, who was given technology, and he lived on Cape Cod. So Joe gave me the number. I called him up, and this is really interesting. This is This is February of 1989.
When you say was given technology, you mean by visitors or
ET, by ET, yeah, okay. ETs. And so I contacted him, and we set up a meeting for the first week of April down on Cape Cod. In the meantime, I had two experiences with an ET. The first one was very interesting. All of a sudden I was sitting in a chair on the other side of a room in obviously an old New England farmhouse. There was a window on the left, snow on the ground. And this guy was in a plaid flannel shirt, blue jeans, but he was obviously not human. I have not yet seen a picture of anybody's experience anywhere that looks like this guy. He had a big head, no hair. He had eyes like ours, blue iris, white background, but they're much bigger than our eyes. Very small nose, very small mouth. He spoke telepathically, very small ears. And I knew he was quite old. I mean, he wasn't a young guy because I could see wrinkles around the corners of his eyes and the corners of his mouth. I could see little wrinkles. So I knew he was not young. And I immediately felt, the thought came in mind, he's my elder brother. That's like the thought. And as soon as I became aware of him sitting there looking at me, I got the thought from him, oh no, he's awake. And immediately this image was projected in my mind of this machine. And that was the end of the experience. And I got the distinct feeling after I came out of that experience that the experience was actually much longer, and I was only allowed a brief flash of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where were you when this happened?
This is again a vivid dream. I was in a dream state, but I was awake. I was conscious. It was all in color. You know, it was real.
So, would you say it was a lucid dream, or would you say it was
lucid dream? Yeah, a lucid dream.
Okay, so you have a lucid dream, and within the dream, the guy says, "Oh, you're awake."
Yeah, and then he projects an image into my mind of this machine.
Of a machine.
So I then went down the next month. I can't remember if it was the end of March or beginning of April, '89, and I went down to see this guy I met, and he takes me down in his garage where he was building this machine. And it was the machine.
This is the guy Bud Hawkins introduced you to?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was the machine that this ET had put in my mind.
So he was building the machine that was in your mind?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. And all right. So when he said, when Bud Hawkins said he had technology, he meant he had sort of blueprints that he was maybe given or downloaded with, but not actually. Yeah,
downloaded with, I think. He was he had experiences, abduction experiences, this guy. I'll just say his name was Paul. He and his whole family were abducted by a large UFO in southern New Jersey around around 86 maybe. And so he had quite experience. He remembers being taken out of the car and going up to the ship, and then with regression from Bud Hopkins, he was able to remember more of it.
So when you go in there and you see this machine, what's your reaction? Are you like, holy
My reaction was pretty, wow. I mean, first it validated what this ET had given me in the image.
Do you remember what the ET was wearing?
Well, yeah, he like I said, a red plaid shirt and blue jeans.
Sorry. That's right, you did say that.
But that was probably a screen, like a projected image, I don't know if it was really physical.
Oh. So
but
what does the machine look like, and what does it do?
It's a counter-rotating disc with electromagnets on the top and bottom disc, spaced vertically off the disc or around the periphery. So so essentially, when they counter-rotate, the electromagnetic fields make and break. And this is another interesting thing. The day I got there, Paul receives a letter from somebody he's never met, called Basil. Basil writes a letter and said, "Hi, I'm Basil. I've been having experiences for a very long time with a certain group of ETs, and they're giving me a lot of technology, and they told me to contact you, and that you're supposed to build our technology." And turns out that this guy Basil had been given Paul's name, but not his address, and he was told to send him a letter, and he didn't know what to do. So he called up, he got in touch with Bud Hopkins and asked if he knew anybody with Paul's name, and Bud said, yeah, and Bud gave him the address, so he wrote the letter to Paul, and it got there the day I got there. So we're reading this letter, and it started talking about technology. So that was a really interesting side.
Yeah. Well, is the technology itself interesting or anything? I mean, is it breakthrough?
The whole technology, what the ETs, through Basil, explained was that the field you produce to create anti-gravity, there's three things that produce with this field: anti-gravity, time-space travel, and faster than light travel. So you can actually use it for any of those purposes, and they call it a plasma field, but they also were very implicit that it was not an ionized field like we call a plasma field. They said there's the protons, neutrons, and electrons are made up of very small particles, smaller than quarks. And it was interesting. They said the quarks are intermediate particles of no consequence. I remember them saying that. They wrote a whole series of letters through Basil. Hundreds of letters, actually.
So was this thing ever successfully created?
Well, we built this machine, Paul built it, and I worked on it. And 3 separate times, it actually started self-rotating. One of the times it was caught on, 2 times it was caught on videotape. So we have the videotapes of it. And Paul, the first time, which was not on videotape, and that was before I got there, it started self-rotating faster and faster. Paul pulled out the plug to the motors that rotate the disc, but it still kept accelerating. And it accelerated so much that the electromagnets just flew off the disc and broke. And then it stopped. The second time, which was videotaped, he was quick when it started doing that. He was quick to pull out the plug of the electromagnets and the motors so that it wouldn't self-destruct. But his problem was he wasn't able to get it to duplicate that effect again. So I worked with him for about 3 years, and we really tried everything, trying to get it to do it. We got a lot of very strange effects. We videotaped ball lightning, very strange arcs, light bending, very strange effects, but we couldn't get it to auto-rotate.
And are you still working on it, or?
I'm working on a different design right now. It's it's actually a variation of what the ETs gave through Basil. It's not like anything I've read anywhere else, and I've not read this theory, like I was talking about, these very small particles. Anyway, the technique is to release these very small particles into a field, and then you manipulate the field to get different effects. These particles literally create an inertial field by their very presence. So, and the ETs explained how the ships work, how the interaction of this field that's created around the ship. That's why the ships generally have smooth skin, so that they can balance the field. And when it hits the atmosphere, it ionizes the gases, and that's what you see the glow from. It's not the ship itself. Would the ship
itself look as though it's staticky or beating with gnats?
Gnats?
Yeah. Would it look staticky?
You're definitely static, and that's what this field does, is create static electricity.
Huh.
It creates all kinds of electrical effects. It creates very strong magnetic effects, very strong electrostatic effects. It ionizes anything that touches it, like gases.
Do you find it odd that aliens would bother to do all of this rigmarole to have you guys not be able to invent it?
We didn't think it was strange because we're not that smart. We needed all the help we could get. But we haven't succeeded yet. And Paul has since moved to Hawaii, so I've stopped working with him, but I think he's still working on something by himself.
Well, let me ask you one more thing, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff here. Just to tell the story of the time-traveling answering machine message.
The time-traveling answering machine. So during this period, I was working with Paul. I was also having my own business up here. I work out of my barn, and my office is there. I started getting these phone calls, always at lunchtime, and it would be, all I would hear was somebody playing doo-wop music, which is one of my favorites. Sorry if nobody likes doo-wop, but I really do. Anyway.
I love doo-wop.
Yeah, me too. Although I had a good voice. Anyway, so they would play doo-wop music on the phone, and then they would hang up. No voice, no nothing. And this happened numerous times, and I was getting a little bit perturbed because I didn't know what was going on. And then every once in a while, probably once or 2 weekends a month, I would go down and work with Paul. So one day, somebody calls up, and I don't hear anything, and then I hear Paul's voice, and Paul's saying, hello, 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 and then hangs up. And it's exactly at noontime. Now, you got to follow the time here to understand or perceive what's happening. Mm-hmm. And then I hear the doo-wop music, and then it stops. So I'm thinking about that. I ate my lunch, and then at 1 o'clock, I call up Paul, and I say, hey, Paul, did anybody call and nobody answer? And he said, yeah. I said, somebody called and there was nobody there. I said, hello, 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 and hung up because there was nobody there. And I said, well, what time was that? And he said it was at 12:30. I said, you're sure 12:30? And he says, yeah. He says, when I picked up the phone, it was in the kitchen. There's a clock there in the wall. He said, I looked right at the clock. It was 12:30 exactly. And there's nobody there, so I hung up. So I suddenly realized that I had gotten the phone call with his recording before he had actually gotten the call.
Was it his recording, or was it him speaking?
What I heard was him speaking.
Like a half hour prior to him receiving a call from you.
Well, see, I called him at 1. I got the original call at 12, and he got the call at 12:30.
Right. So you got a call, and it was him saying hello, hello, hello. But he perceives it as at 12:30. You called him, and he was saying hello, hello, hello.
I called him at 1, but I got the call at noon, and which was him answering the phone at 12:30, half an hour later.
That is weird. And what did you make of that? What?
I don't know. It was clearly somebody was monitoring, is following Paul and I's work. I don't know who. And the strange thing is, last summer I got another call with doo-wop music. I don't know who.
When was the last
this is
time?
many years later. Huh?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. When was the last time that you had heard
The last time was last summer, yeah.
Was it before or after the Harvard thing?
It was before.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if you should be worried.
Well, maybe it's the government, but I just don't think they go out of their way to do that kind of stuff. So maybe. I mean, it wasn't really harassing. Mm. It was certainly letting me know that they're aware, whoever it is. Huh. And whoever it is also seemed to have the abilities to manipulate time, which ETs are known to do, but I don't know.
Can I ask this? I mean,
sure.
If you, to the best of your recollection, about the time that you were getting these calls, first of all, could you recognize the tune?
I thought about that. I said, I wish I could remember the tunes, but now I can't remember the tunes. No. Even last summer, I can't remember what was played.
So when you directly heard it, you couldn't make out exactly what the tune was?
I can't remember what the tune was.
Okay.
But I knew it was doo-wop music.
Okay.
Thinking back, none of the calls, including one last summer, can I say I know which record they were playing, which song.
Okay. Familiar at all past being doo-wop?
Excuse me?
Was it familiar at all to you, doo-wop aside, the form of music aside, was it at all familiar to you in any sense of thought?
No.
Okay.
And that's, now that you've mentioned it, I never thought of that before, but no, there's, I don't know what that means. But
now here's the other question is, during the time that the calls were happening, and in particular the call that you received at 12:30, or 12 o'clock rather, or whatever it was, the discrepancy in the time, were you guys actively, or was Paul actively testing this experimental machine he had built?
I think he was at the time,
Could I suggest to you then that it worked?
It's possible. It's possible.
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind to me is that it worked. It did something.
It may have.
And I could probably, even postulate somewhere in here that the doo-wop music was was your music, was something you had on at some point during the day or night, and that's what you were hearing. I hear that you mentioned with this machine that there were some odd time, some very odd effects to what it was doing. And I have to wonder, what effects might you not have readily noticed? And is this some kind of, I don't know, ripple effect of starting the machine, letting it run to the point of breaking? Could it have worked?
Yeah, that I don't know, and it's certainly something to think about. There's I've learned not to close out any ideas. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I also think that I have to wonder if we're talking about. I mean, we talk about non-locality around here a lot, and I have to wonder if a machine like that is obtained from some kind of unknown source.
Yeah.
You have to wonder.
You might be right. It might be having some effect that we're not aware of.
Well, effect not only environmentally, I would say, but effects on the two of you, because you were the two involved with it. So did it have an effect in some kind of altered state of consciousness between the two of you?
That's possible.
Which manifested in, a local way.
Yeah, that's possible.
But the thing I caught very early on when you were talking about your experiences is that 3 a.m. seems to hold a good portion of your experiential time in the sense of the time.
Yeah.
I have to ask this before going further with that part was Paul an engineer as well?
No, he was an environmental scientist. He was on the original Hudson River boat with Pete Seeger.
Okay.
What do they call it? Pollution Raiders or whatever they called their group.
Okay. And what about Basil? Did he?
He never graduated from high school.
Okay.
He worked at an assembly plant assembling electronic stuff. He had, if you talk to him, you'd be amazed at his lack of education, yet what he experienced on the ships that he was taken on.
Okay.
Just amazing stories. But
those are the kind of things that kind of leapt out at me a little bit with the 3 a.m. in particular.
Yeah.
Was something that we've talked about a lot on this show, which is a chemical called DMT that is produced in the pineal gland of the brain, and also is I guess you call it a manufactured drug by nature. In fact, it exists in most places in nature, and that our own bodies actually make it. And one of the things that people experience when they ingest DMT in one form or another is beings, and this is not the type of thing that only some people, relate this, but quite a few people relate these beings who then, I don't know, we had Graham Hancock was another one of our guests, and he related how that there is this overwhelming inspiration that comes forth out of these experiences with these beings encountered in a DMT altered state of consciousness. And I find it really interesting that you had this experience where you were shown a machine or given some kind of creative spark into this machine. Yeah. Someone else is actually building that same machine.
Right. And
then you've got a separate guy that comes in on the same kind of wave line and says, hey, I'm supposed to contact you about this thing.
Right. Exactly.
Here's more. I definitely see this inspirational type of thing. When you had this lucid dream in that state, did you come out of that saying you were just like a fire was lit under your ass, like you've got to do something with this?
Well, yeah. Well, I had been looking for direction for technology, and this was said here's the direction. Is basically what the dream said.
Right.
Here, go in this direction. Now, but I want to say something here that you can say that, okay, well, maybe that's my own mind's creation because of the pineal gland secretion at a certain time of the night. But I also, and this is that we talk a lot at GEMI, the John Mack Institute, the ETs themselves, I think that probably the majority of the ones that visit, from what I've read, experiences from the other people in the group, they communicate on this psychic level. Let me give you an example. One of the things that came through Basil, and I've heard it from another source also, is that when you accelerate a ship to beyond the speed of light, it ceases to be totally physical. You enter what's called a psychic plane. The ship is held together by idea, From that point, you're out of the timeline, out of the physical universe, and you can enter the physical universe at any point in that timeline. But also it means that you're conscious on a psychic level. Most humans are not conscious on this psychic level, and I'm essentially postulating that psychic level is very real. Unfortunately, most people on this planet are just conscious on a very physical level, so it's only on our waking state. But eventually we will learn how to communicate on the psychic level. It's also called the astral plane, I guess you might call it. Yeah. I think the ETs communicate on this level, and they can communicate non-locally on this level. They don't have to have a ship in your backyard to communicate with you. And if they do communicate with you psychically, it's not unreal. I mean, you are perceiving their conscious existence, and they are separate beings. It's not an imagination. What makes it appear not real is because we're not used to psychic reality. We're not experiencing that. And another aspect of this is the 3 to 4 hour in the morning period is also called the hour of the wolf. The hour of the wolf is when a lot of these things happen, and the reason is it's at that point when the electromagnetic effects of the sun are at their lowest point, and it sort of frees the mind to experience more subtle effects. And so your mind is actually more open to the psychic at that time than at other times.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I mean, the one thing that I have heard is that 3 a.m. is the highest levels in the body of DMT.
Yeah, but that's because of the sun.
You know, right, exactly. And just to clarify to you, when I say, talk about the pineal gland and DMT and chemicals like that, believe me, I by no means imply that that these things have I hate to use the word real, but that they're not real. I think that a great many people, including Terence McKenna, Graham Hancock, and several others, Dr. Rick Strassman has made a pretty good case to say that, when these chemicals are ingested, or if these chemicals enter the brain naturally, that we're actually going into an altered state of consciousness that actually allows us to see and experience things that are all around us all the time.
All the time, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that that's almost more uncomfortable. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I guess I'm a fan of the more uncomfortable one, which is that they are around us all the time, and that the notion of space, planet, the reality that we're living in, almost being like a sleep state, and that being in the presence of these beings is more real than real, if that makes any sense. I mean, have you had that kind of feeling in your own experiences that any contact with these beings seems more real to you than real is? I mean,
sometimes it seems more real in these vivid experiences than when I wake up.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, I'll put it this way: have you, past what you've told us about, have you had frequent UFO sightings in daylight hours or nighttime hours?
I had an experience. I think I told Jeremy this one. That when we went out to dinner. Remember the woman? Do you remember that experience I told you?
Not sure yet.
Okay, this happened in November, just this past November. Again, it was a vivid dream. It happened again in the middle of the night. I don't know what the time was. Mm-hmm. And in the dream, I was standing in my living room looking outside, and it was stars out, And I looked up over the trees in the front yard, and there was this ship just hovering over the trees there. And it was a white ship. It was small, maybe 15 feet diameter, maybe. And it had a glass see-through dome on the top. And I could faintly see a being in the dome. And I immediately, psychically, I felt no psychic fear or any kind of projection from the being. So I felt very calm. versus some other similar experiences were very powerful and very scary. But this one was very calm, and so I projected a thought. I said, well, you're there. If you want to talk to me, you're welcome to talk to me. And immediately I floated up through the ceiling, out the wall, and then I was in this gray space. That's all I can say. It was this gray space, and there was a woman there. All I could see was from her top of her shoulders up. I could see her hair in great detail. It was like wispy platinum, or actually not even platinum blonde. It was just white. Maybe 3 inches long and very thin, but I couldn't see her face. Her face was all blurry, and it was amazing. I even as this was happening, I was saying, well, she's obviously blocking out her face, so I can't see it. But I could see the hair, around. And she said, may I, and I also knew it was a woman just by the vibration. There was no other reason other than it was a vibration.
Okay.
And she said, may I ask you some questions? And I said, sure. And she proceeded to ask 8 or 10 questions, none of which I can remember now. I remembered some of them in the morning when I woke up, but I can't remember any of them now. But I remember thinking, oh, these are pretty simple questions. She should know the answer to these.
Right.
And then that was the end of the dream. And a couple of days later, my daughter, who lives in an apartment over our garage, she told me that, she said, I had a really strange experience the other night. It was the same night that I had this experience. And I said, what? She said, well, I couldn't sleep, so I opened the window. I was just looking out the window. She smokes, so she was smoking a cigarette, looking out the window. And she said, out over the trees, there was 2 green lights hovering over the trees. And I said, well, she said, first I thought, well, maybe they're planes. But she said they didn't move, and they didn't move for 20 minutes. They just sat there. And then they just blinked out. She said, I almost called you, but it was 1:30 that's right, 1:30 in the morning, and you were probably asleep. So anyway, and then Jeremy, you showed me your picture of a green light you saw.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so...
What Jeff saw as well.
So this is a vivid dream, but yet it had a physical reality that my daughter saw.
Right, that was verified by her. Yeah.
Right.
Are most of your experiences in that kind of altered state?
Yes.
Place? Okay.
They're all in that altered state. Well, okay. Except for I saw that white thing, the white bird-like thing float across the yard, and that was totally awake, and also that rectangular thing floating out my window.
Do you, and this is may seem like a complete aside as a question, but do you more often than not, perceive things in normal waking hours around your house that seem, to be more or less on the edge of your perception? Maybe
all the time. I'm only seeing flashes of light.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah,
and I'm totally awake. I mean, I saw one the other day. I mean, it's here's the one that happened a couple months ago. I was in my shop, I don't know what I was doing. I was looking off towards the wall, and all of a sudden this light just flashed up. Not only did it flash up near the ceiling, but then it moved over to the corner of the room and disappeared. And I said, what the heck was that?
Yeah.
But I just saw a flash the other day. It just moved and shot across the room. I don't know what they are, though. I don't ever feel any communication with them.
Right.
I feel that they are conscious something or other.
Have you ever experienced...
Once in my shop, this was about a year ago, I was working late on a project. It was around 11:30 at night, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And I immediately turned around. There was nobody there.
Right.
But it was a definite tap on my shoulder. It was physical. It was very real.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was anything of the, I don't know, what people outside of all this would deem like a ghost type experience, or like a poltergeist type of experience or anything like that. I mean,
twice I've come into the house and I walk into the den and the CD player turns on all by itself. I don't know what that is.
Do you find that if you are paying more attention to all of this stuff, that you seem to see more things, or that more things seem to present themselves in a way that you really can't deny. I don't mean to imply that you're like the dog with his ears perked up listening for the bump in the night, and then of course you're going to hear something. Do you find that when you pay more attention that something undeniable seems to happen in one way or another?
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, I have to say that I'm generally keeping my eyes open all the time now.
Right, you're always peaked. Yeah, yeah.
For instance, there was something that happened just about a year ago. I think you met Dennis at the meeting in Cambridge, Jeremy, and So he was up visiting. We work on alternate energy together. So it was in the dark, and we decided to just go up to I'm on an overlook up on a hill, and we can see Boston. We're about 55 miles from Boston, but the hill's at 1,100 feet elevation. And it's a big field, and you can see the panorama of the sky. So we said, we're standing out there looking at the sky, and said, if there's any ETs up there, say hello to us. And all of a sudden a light flashed directly overhead, just way up high. There's a flash of light. And then moved, at arm's length, it moved about 6 inches, another flashlight. Then it moved in another direction, another flashlight. And it happened about 7 times in random locations in the sky. That was very real. Another time Dennis was there. We had been working on alternate energy, and he was just leaving. I looked out the back window, and there was a green light hovering in the sky. I looked at it, and it just blinked out. That was another green light experience.
And if you don't mind me asking, and I know this seems like another odd-ass question, but I got to ask it, what is your, ancestral nationality?
Scotch-Irish.
Yeah, of course you are.
So Leask is a Orkney Island name.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, very interesting.
I guess I kind of we sort of skipped over how you got involved with John Mack, and I did not know John Mack. I got involved after, and it was through Dennis, who did know John Mack, and Dennis started working with me on the alternate energy, and then he invited me to one of their meetings, and that's how I got involved with it. Are there any other sort of standout experiences where there was a communication involved?
Yeah, there was. Around 1995, for about a year, I started having, or 2 years, I started having these periodic experiences, vivid dreams again, where I'd either from my bedroom, I'd look out the window and there'd be a ship there, or I'd be outside in the yard at night and a ship would come over, and I would always feel the psychic presence of the beings. Very, very powerful. Literally like they could grab, I felt like my mind was literally held in a vice. I don't know, I know you've had experiences, Jeremy. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but...
Well, Jeff talks about, and I think I know what he's talking about when he talks about a feeling of proximity, where I don't know, I've gotten that feeling of just... Yeah, either being watched and or dread.
Yeah, this is dread, but this is also control. I knew that there was nowhere I could hide, nowhere I could go. They knew I was there. They controlled my mind, but not malevolently, simply powerfully. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just the feeling.
It's just the outright psychic power of their minds is so scary.
Right.
Because it's nothing we experience. I have never, you don't meet somebody on the street who can suddenly grab hold of your mind like that.
When you say that you saw a ship, did you see a light or did you actually see a craft in the sky?
Craft.
What did it look like?
Round, generally, like the one I most recently saw. This is just about a little over a year ago. It was hovering over the trees. It looked very much like the Gulf Breeze type ships.
Yeah.
And it had a reddish, orangey red band of light around the middle as it hovered over the trees.
And did it communicate anything to you?
Well, this time I felt a lot of fear. I was, for some reason, sometimes I get really afraid when I feel that powerful grab on my mind. And I got the distinct thought from them. They said, "He's too afraid. We have to leave." And then the ship started glowing white, and it shot off at a high speed.
And do you talk to your family about this stuff?
Oh, yeah. my wife's had a lot of experiences too.
What are her experiences?
Well, her first one, she was with a group of living in a kind of sort of a hippie house up in Vermont, and they're all up around 11 at night, and they looked outside, and out in the back field there was no houses, no roads, no nothing. And around 11 at night, these kind of a dual light just descended out of the sky into the field. And then they're kind of looking at it and saying, well, what's that? And then one by one, everybody fell asleep, except my wife. She was the last one. And then there was this light just out in the field, and then she fell asleep. And then, let's see, there was one time, she had numerous times when she would tell me in the morning, she said, did you see the lights coming in through the window last night? I said, no. And she said, yeah, I woke up and there was bright light coming in through our window. It was lighting up the whole room. And I tried to wake you up, but you wouldn't wake up. And that happened a whole bunch of times. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't have any memory of what happened.
And you said your dad also had missing time?
Yeah, he was. This happened on 1965. He was coming back from New York City. He used to go down there in business a lot. And he had the time calculated. He knew exactly how many minutes it would take, hours and minutes to come home. And he said he was coming on Route 495 north, and there was nobody on the road. This is when 495 had just opened. It was a pretty new road. And he saw this a dual light following behind him in the car. And it kept this distance. And he was always speeding, so he thought it was a cop. So he said, well, I'm going to pull over. I'm going to pull over just before the next exit and just see who it is. And, just before he pulled over, a beam of light came out of whatever it was, lit up his whole car, was bright with light, and then it went back. The next thing he knew, it was just a light following him. And then he pulled over, and it never came by. It just kind of disappeared. And then when he got home, he got home an hour and a half late. And I remember talking to Brett. He said, I don't know what happened at the time. I should have been here at midnight, but I didn't get home till 1:30. Very strange. I just remember him saying that. Huh.
I want to just get back to the free energy stuff for one sec.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're on the verge of a breakthrough? Do you think that in your lifetime you will have created whatever it is that they showed you?
If I had enough time. The problem is I have to work to stay alive, and then, and then with a family, it's you just all your time gets eaten up. I'd say confidence-wise in the technology, absolutely. Time-wise, I don't know.
So do you think that what you've demonstrated, I mean, if you were to put the schematic out there just for general science sake, do you think it would get scoffed at, or do you think that someone would take up the mantle and say, this is, my God, Eureka, this is genius? I would put the theory out. I wouldn't put the design out. In fact, Basil's a source of the current machine. One of the sources. I have two sources for the information. The other source is just psychically derived. That's all I'll say. And the design is, I can't release it. But I can release it. I can talk about the technology. Mm-hmm. And there's the theory behind it. But I will not put out the design, no. What about the videotape of it actually working? Well, no, I'm talking about the current machine. Paul's machine, videotape, yeah, I can put that out. I have to convert it. It's on a tape. I have to convert it to a CD, a DVD, excuse me, and then I could send you a copy when I get around to doing that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then could we put it on YouTube or something along those lines?
I don't know about that.
No? Okay.
The reason is because I don't have Paul's permission to put it on.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And,
so let me just ask you this then, too. I mean, this is sort of another question we've been struggling with is, does it matter where they're from? If these are beings that indeed can enter some sort of psychic realm or field of knowledge, something along those lines?
Yep, it's a field of awareness.
Field of awareness, and then they think their way to point B from point A, then does it matter to that society anymore where they're from? I mean, they're non-local, right?
They're not local. And I would say it doesn't matter.
And that's what we will become when we break through that technology.
Exactly.
This is all I've been trying to get at, Jeff.
Okay. I still want to know. Sorry.
But I will tell, I did get one very strong message once. This is, it was one of those mind-grabbing times. I was out in the field in this vivid dream. A ship comes right over my head. I feel the psychic grabbing on my mind. But this time, for some reason, I simply wasn't afraid at all. And they downloaded a whole package of information into my mind. And they said, I was kind of perturbed that they kept bugging me, at night. And I'd say, what are you doing? What is my duty here? What am I supposed to be doing in relation to what they're doing? And they said, your duty is to rid your society of isms. And then what they downloaded in my mind all of a sudden unrolled, and it was this long list of isms. And the top ism was capitalism, but then all the others, sexism, nationalism, racism, et cetera, et cetera. There was a list of a long list.
Followed by the words, no pressure.
You don't have to do it for a long time, don't worry about it. And then I said, well, if this is my duty, what's your duty? And they said, our duty is to change the psychic vibration of the planet.
Any time frame for that?
And they also said, I looked at the top of listing capitalism. They said capitalism is destroying your planet.
Yeah.
You must get rid of it. That was a message, a very strong, direct, clear message.
Do you believe it? Do you believe that you have a duty to do that?
Absolutely.
In what way? In what sense can you actually do that?
Well, I perceive that these isms are a major problem in society. And I also know from other contact with these beings that why they're not landing right now. They said, I said, why aren't you landing? They said, if we were to land, they said, your society is going through a very important social transition right now. If we were to land, it would adversely affect that social transition. You would not grow socially in the way that you should. So we cannot land until you make that transformation. And I know what that transformation is. It's a transformation from a materially based perception of reality to a spiritually based or spiritual psycho perception of reality.
So pretty much what you're talking about in terms of technology would be
exactly. And new science, the new science of this coming age is going to be just that interaction between the psychic and the physical.
Well, is that so far off from Buddhist or even Hindu thought, where everything is consciousness and matter is a manifestation of consciousness?
Yeah, I don't think it's that far off.
So we just need to be Buddhists.
Well, I'd say, no, probably Buddha had contact with these guys.
This is Lama, certainly, right?
What? Yeah. Well, if you accept the existence of the psychic and the spiritual, then that's a realm that's accessible to any conscious being, no matter where in the universe you are. So, whether Buddha discovered it or an ET comes and tells you about it, it's both the same.
Did you ever ask them why me and not why not
the
president?
I never did. But I get, it's like I say, I have to say, I felt, when I saw that bald-headed guy, I really felt like this was possibly, a relative, somebody I had been once. I had been that race once. So I feel that I may have come, that this is not my home planet, etc. That's a feeling. I have no proof of that. I just had that feeling.
Right.
I mean, I had another experience with that guy, too, so...
What were the other experiences?
All of a sudden, I found myself standing in front of him. He was standing, he had a uniform on. It was a whitish, silvery uniform with a few black little highlights on the corners, like edging or something, and had a little insignia on his left breast, but I don't remember what it is. It was sort of like a collarless one-piece suit. He was about 5'6" tall. He was not a gray, as I described. He was very different than a gray, but still, it's certainly not an earth human. And he asked me, he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, the first question that popped in my mind, I said, "Is the earth hollow?" because I just happened to be thinking about that around that time. And immediately, instantly, the next thought, I was getting off a ship in this large cavern somewhere in the earth. I knew, I had all this intuitive knowledge instantly about what this was. I instantly knew, no, the center of the earth is not hollow. It's probably magma. But this was a hollow cavern, whether natural or man-made or human-made, somewhere in the crust of the earth. It was very large. I was on a beach on the edge of this large, it was a lake large enough so I could not see the other side, and it had a sun, which I looked at immediately, and it didn't hurt my eyes, so immediately I knew it was an artificial light, just made to look like the sun. There was absolutely no wind, there was no waves on the water, it was very calm, and there was plants growing all around the edge of the beach, and they were all very, succulents. Do you know what a succulent plant is?
No.
More the tropical type plants where they're thick leaves.
Right.
They store water. And but they were every color but green. There was no green. They were like blue and reds and orange and yellow leaves. Very exotic looking plants, very interesting. And so that was the answer, and that was the last I remember.
So this guy just came to you, and the first things out of his mouth was, "Any questions?"
Yeah, exactly. And
awesome.
Again, I had the distinct feeling that I had been talking to him for quite some time before that, but
right.
At that exact point in time, I became conscious of it. He was probably talking to my subconscious before that.
Hmm. And this was the same guy. I mean, he looked the same.
Same guy.
Except the
clothing. Same guy, yeah.
Wow.
I'd have to say that the import of all this, and the import of what Jemmy is doing, is the acknowledgement of other reality beyond the physical, and the acknowledgement of that interaction happening all the time, and that we should allow this to be, get rid of the fear of talking about it. This is a real experience. Psychic experience is real. We should talk about it. We should not be afraid. No ridicule.
Right.
Open. We should be more open to this.
Well, and on that note, I want to thank you for going public with your stories.
Okay.
With life and with all of this, because when we did the Harvard thing, it was sort of a bone of contention of just how public we should go, or how that's going to work. Yeah,
well, I don't think they were against going public. They didn't want it tape recorded, and I'm not quite sure why. I was on the line. I don't know why, but you have to honor some people's feelings in that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, I want to thank you for coming out and doing the show.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Take care.
Bye.
And just a quick footnote at the end, you'll notice that there were a bunch of slapping or snapping sounds. This is something that happened every now and then during the interview, and I edited it out to the best of my ability, but at the end it became so odd and blatant that I was actually instant messaging Jeff and saying, "Jeff, what are you doing? Knock it off. Whatever you're doing, you're making too much noise." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And then when we talked about it later, he said, he heard it too, but it wasn't him. And it was coming from his microphone input. So, I mean, I can see where things are coming from. So it was definitely coming in from his end. But he says he wasn't making any noise. He wasn't doing anything. So, just another odd thing to add to the list. All right.
Hey guys and gals, it's Jeff here with a message about Mark Nesbitt's Supernatural Summit, February 19th through the 21st, 2010. This is unlike any paranormal conference you've ever been to. In fact, one of the reasons it's so innovative is that you never leave your home. You attend this online. This is a virtual conference. You can be anywhere in the world with net access, and from a home PC, a laptop, right down to a cell phone, you can attend this gig. You can ask questions live to the presenters, interact with different exhibitors. Every aspect of an in-person conference is there. This is over 50 hours of presentations and interactions with paranormal investigators, authors, and exhibitors, right down to your fellow attendees without the travel cost or hotel expenses. One of the best parts, after this whole thing is over, you've got 4 weeks to watch recordings of the lectures you may have missed during the live event. You're not going to miss anything but the hotel bills, the travel nonsense, and of course your missed work time. There's also exhibitor booths where you can shop from home for books, DVDs, and even investigation equipment. So you're not even missing the tables you normally see at a conference. Some of the presenters, some of the best out there: Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Scott Crownover, Lane Crosby, Dr. Charles Emmons, Rob Conover, John Zaffis, and even the dear friend of this show, Mr. Mark Nesbitt. And that's just some of the great presenters you'll be able to hear and interact with. Now, here's the deal for our listeners. You're saying, what's this cost? Well, the cost, if you mention Paratopia and register before February 15th, the cost is $50. That's $25 off the regular admission for the whole conference. Now, in addition to the discount, Mark's decided to do something even more special for our Paratopia listeners. Again, go to www.supernaturalsummit.com. Mention Paratopia when you register. You'll not only get the discount, but in addition to that, you'll be automatically entered for a drawing to win a night's investigation with Mark Nesbitt and me, Jeff Ritzman from Paratopia. So guys, head on over right now, www.supernaturalsummit.com. Get registered. Again, the date for this is the 19th of February through the 21st of February. Go check it out, www.supernaturalsummit.com. So the Jer, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So what'd you think of that interview?
I liked it. I'm glad Chris was brave enough to come on the show and step out of hiding. Well, not really hiding, but step out of anonymity or obscurity, or just, talking about it publicly. Whatever the right turn of phrase is.
Yeah. I think the machine thing was very interesting. The inspired of three men to all kind of, come together with this to make this device that they've all.
Interesting, yeah. They came together to make this device, and that's all very supernatural sounding, and yet ultimately they might not end up making it. So what was it for?
I don't know. I said to you after the show, once we were kind of cleaning up and getting ready to sign off, that I think he's our guest tonight. I think he was like a walking example of the 3 a.m. DMT in the brain type of experience. Not to negate it as all imaginary. Clearly, when your daughter has a tandem sighting event of a strange light at the same time that you're having a lucid dream of sorts of a craft in the same spot, that's a little too much to. That makes you think a little bit about these people who say, I had this dream. Immediately when I hear that, I switch off. I'm like, okay, it's a dream. Whatever.
I had this dream where I got healed, so I don't know what to do anymore,
Yeah.
My boundaries are a little opaque.
Blurring all the more, yeah. So this was a different kind of discussion for me, because usually I don't pay a great deal of attention to those types of accounts, but nonetheless, the machine, the I don't know, the, how do you put it, the inspired obsession with this machine to make this work, to do whatever it's going to do. I thought was interesting. And I thought the phone call thing was really pretty wild. I guess you could easily say, well, he didn't look at the clock right, or his clock was off, or somebody's, something like that. You could put any plausible explanation with it you want, but he seemed pretty steadfast in his notion that this is not, this. I didn't make any mistake. This is exactly how it happened, and I've gotten these phone calls.
Yeah,
the ragtime music or whatever it was, the doo-wop music.
It stopped. The doo-wop music stopped. So
right.
That's not a clue that this was the cap to that whole experience,
Yeah, that's pretty wild. And like I said, what if the machine worked and they didn't know it?
Yeah.
What if it did do something? I mean, it's almost like I mean, I hate to make the analogy with a television show, but like Lost, where the consciousness goes forth into the future or the past, and the body doesn't. You know, it's one of those kind of weird, I don't know, or parallel universes, or a time dilation for better, want of a better word. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's always pretty damn interesting, and I have to wonder, you know, did this thing actually do something to them in the room while it was running? Not so much environmentally, but to them, to make something like this happen. I thought that was really neat. I'd love to see this thing, by the way. Mm. I mean, that would be really cool. So
yeah, I find it interesting that he doesn't consider himself an abductee, too. You know, he has all of the, you know, sort of the Reagan Lee syndrome. I've got all of the symptoms, but I ain't diseased.
Well, I mean, I guess he doesn't see. I mean, he's never had the on a table naked, they're taking my sperm, you know, that kind of thing. I think that's like the stigma when you think of abductee, is that sort of scenario, that public eye type of picture, and that's just, it's a lot broader than that and bigger than that. Sometimes it's not even that. So I don't blame him for not accepting that title, 'cause I don't like that title either. But nonetheless, interesting guy, and some wild stuff. I mean,
well,
really.
What do you make of the reptilian getting into bed with him?
I found that like really reminiscent of Graham Hancock's ayahuasca thing, where the big serpentine snake wraps herself around him and lays, you know, the mammoth head of this snake on his shoulder, and that seemed oddly similar to that. You know, I mean, I have to wonder what it is with reptiles. What is it with reptiles at all? Why aren't they birds? Why aren't they bird people? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, one simple answer might be the fact that we have a reptilian brain. Mm. There might be some throwback to that piece of us that, you know, gets activated in a certain way during these times.
You know what else I think about is that, you know, I think of the mind working in geometric shapes, and of course a snake scale and the repetitive of, you know, the diamond shaped scale is certainly a geometric shape, repetitive geometric shapes. You have to wonder if it doesn't have something to do with that.
Well, I know, like, I don't know if you remember this, or if I've talked about this in the show, just stop me, but one of my weird, like, gray basket, I don't know how to categorize this events, was when I let the meditation energy sort of do its thing, and it started rubbing really, really fast on the back of my neck, on these two vertebrae, and then on up into my neck, up into my skull, slid me out onto the floor, started tapping around my head, and like heat rose up on the floor, and then slid me back into bed, and I looked at my arm, and my arm looked like a reptile's arm.
Yeah. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, and then I you know, come to find out later that that's where I was rubbing is basically the reptilian brain, you know, is located there. So whatever this was doing was definitely stimulating that, you know.
What does that mean, reptilian brain? What is that? I mean, where does that come from?
This is where I need to know more about biology.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Wikipedia says there's what's called a triune brain, which consists of the R complex, that would be the reptilian complex, the limbic system, and the neocortex. And it says here, the brainstem and older atavistic areas of the central nervous system control normal and voluntary behavior that the conscious mind does not, such as the cardiac and respiratory functions. These are found in all vertebrates, but are not considered to be part of the triune brain. The R complex is named for the most advanced part of the brain higher mammals share with reptiles. The R complex is responsible for rage and basic survival, fight or flight responses. Often the R complex can override the more rational function of the brain and result in unpredictable, primitive behavior in even the most sentient of creatures, humans included. A well-developed and healthy neocortex can monitor R complex activity in sentient beings. The reptilian complex is the most ancient part of a very successful brain scheme, evolutionarily speaking. So there you go. That's what we got in us.
Interesting.
So basically, we share some things in common with reptiles, which kind of makes sense, this whole reptilian alien thing to me, you know? Maybe
it's a form of us.
A form of us, a projection of what we were, or something.
You say that, I mean, when you were reading there, you were saying that the reptilian part of the brain is responsible for rage or fight or flight. Maybe that's what brings on these type of things, or visionary experiences, is fight or flight, rage, fear, those primal. And it is very primal. I mean, when you're in that kind of state, when you're in that horrified, panic state, you have to wonder if that's not, somehow geometrically responsible for the reptile vision or perception of that.
Often the R complex can override the more rational function of the brain and result in unpredictable primitive behavior in humans. So it sounds like if you get into a fight or flight instinct situation, the R, the reptilian brain takes over. That's sort of where you go to, and that's
freaking curious, isn't it?
Yeah,
we may have to have a neurologist on this show.
Yeah,
that's pretty interesting, actually.
We have a lot to cover there. I mean, would a neurologist also cover sleep paralysis and old
yeah, probably.
syndrome?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, that was a big holdover from the last show. I noticed a lot of people on the discussion board talking about sleep paralysis and the definition thereof, and how that applies to any sort of alien experience. And I agree with you. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, when you look at the broader picture of everything that's going on, I think that's one of the easy, go-to answers for skeptics to talk about, is that whole sleep paralysis thing, because parts of it sound similar. So that must be it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a silly thing to say. I can stimulate your brain to make you believe there are people in the room. Therefore, and since there aren't any, does that mean people don't exist? I mean, you replace people with aliens, and suddenly, aliens don't exist. This thing doesn't exist.
Right.
No, you just prove that you can stimulate the brain to make it seem as though there are other people, bodies in the room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think back to that Larry King life after death thing that had, what was his name from Survivor? The host from Survivor? He actually was standing in for Larry King that night. And I remember, I think it was Shermer was on saying that, he went up to, what was it, Canada somewhere. I can never remember this doctor's name, with the God helmet.
Persinger,
Dr. Persinger. Put the helmet on him, and he had an out-of-body experience, and he had this and he had that, and he's like, I've experienced these things, so I know what I'm talking about. And and as we know, Stacey Horn was the one who said Dr. Persinger is reevaluating what he thinks about these experiences with the God helmet. He's beginning to think that possibly they do represent some kind of reality or altered perceptions, seeing something that may be there, and brainwaves being altered by these electrodes. So.
Well,
I felt like jumping to the screen.
Shermer can't say, I've had these experiences. No. Somebody who's had those experiences is the only one qualified to say that that's the same thing.
Exactly.
I mean, it's idiotic. And you know what else is idiotic is that Shermer is on there with Deepak Chopra and that whole crew talking about reincarnation. Yeah. I'm sorry, but what exactly are you a specialist of? I mean, why is it that skeptic, you just have the word skeptic as a title, and suddenly you're an expert on everything? Really? I mean, UFOs to reincarnation? Are you serious?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I mean, that's probably the first or second time I've ever seen him on a program where I think he was made a complete ass of. I mean, I think in the general populace watching a show like that, they always expect to hear the skeptical view, and I think a lot of times that the public, of course, we know the public is not ultimately aware of every nuance of the UFO experience. So when these people come on and talk, we get in a rage because, well, they don't have the whole story, and now the public is thinking that the skeptical angle is correct because it sounds more plausible and it sounds more cohesive, and they can get their hands around something like that. But I think this is really one of the few times where he just, it seemed his whole argument just completely fell apart in his lap. Yeah. I mean, it was, and you watch this and you're like, oh man, he's losing it. I mean, he's losing this cohesive thought that he's trying to put across with every new guest that is coming up. in support of, this contention of life after death or this sort of thing, or these experiences being real, he's falling further down the ladder here on this show. I mean, it was great to watch.
Well, sure, but I just don't understand how it is that these people can just go on without any specialty, I mean, these are broad topics to be a specialist in reincarnation and UFOs and psychic ability and alien abduction.
Well,
really?
I've written what I think about skeptics and what we should do, and I've said it before that I think a great many of them just want to be that, I don't know, they want to stand in as that figure who calls the masses to rationality. They want to be the ones to solve the mystery and look how foolish you all are being. I mean, in some way, I see this just about from every skeptic I've ever heard talk, speak, be on a TV show, radio, whatever. It seems to be this deep-seated need to be right, to be the one who's in the, I am thinking logically, and you all are out of your minds. That sort of elitist type of behavior, which I don't know what kind of personality that is, but they all do seem to have a similar personality trait like that. And I think that, they're always asking for, well, why don't we get a psychological study done of these abductees, a real psychological study? Well, how about we do one on skeptics, on why a person feels this need to go out of their way to dispel what someone else believes, thinks, or theorizes on, just because they don't agree with it. Do you follow what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's confounding to me. Like
TV to be, or in print or
that
whatever,
person.
To be, the nah guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could see, like, when Phil Klass was alive, his whole thing was, who knows if he was telling the truth, but he claimed he was afraid of UFO cults and things like that, and he didn't want this to turn into a religion. And so you could say, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't get the feeling out of any of these other people that that's the case. I certainly haven't heard it from them, that that's why they're doing this. It just seems like it's their job. It's their hobby. It's the thing they do.
Well, I mean, I guess in defense of Shermer, can I say that on this show? I mean, that is his magazine, The Skeptical Inquirer. I mean, it's his. I guess that's his business. He publishes a magazine on this stuff. But then again, who publishes a magazine?
Yeah.
Just going, nah.
Don't worry, everybody.
Right. When you really think about it, it is really... It's interesting. I mean, I find that fascinating as a human trait.
What is at stake? Because I think about like what we do, and the reason, like, we basically do that. I mean, we make fun of Greer and call out the people that we think are crap. I mean, we do that.
Sure.
I think we serve that function to the best of our ability. But we have something at stake, which is that this is a part of our lives, and so we don't want to be cast in the same light as those people. A skeptic doesn't have that. They've got no emotional tie to this subject.
Right.
So what are they doing? Right. What do they care?
I don't know.
So you're right. There should be a psychological evaluation of these skeptics.
I mean, I think it's an effort to, I don't know, be the smartest one in the room, or at least portray that personality of I'm above. It just seems to me like it's a very elitist type behavior, that you've got to go out of your way to do this. So yeah, I think there should be a study of that kind of personality. It's a fact. I mean, and again, if you look at the whole UFO ball of wax, and skeptics are certainly a part of that. As much as I hate to say it, it's just another interesting wrinkle of, persons involved in this, and the whys, after a while just become so many. It's like, what are we going to study the people, or are we going to study the phenomena? It's like, take your pick. Either one is equally interesting to me.
Well, I wonder what a Shermer would do with a guy like you or me, I mean, here you have two experiencers who would basically agree, we don't want this to turn into religion or cult or hucksterism or any of that garbage, and yet we're still saying, oh yeah, and by the way, it's real. And I don't think we come across as loons. I hope not. I think that we could hold an intelligent conversation about this stuff with them that wouldn't, where they would have to be forced to recognize, oh yeah, unless these guys are somehow compartmentally delusional, I just got to take them at their word, right?
I think that he would say, and I certainly don't presume to speak for him, but I think that he would say, well, I'm sure that the experience seemed very real to you, but, and then go on with whatever prosaic explanation he could come up with. I mean, that's what I think would be. It wouldn't be, I don't think you're liars. I don't think you're lying. I think you actually believe this. But I mean, how many times have we heard that? I don't think they're lying, but, and then the explanation, when they end up at the end of that explanation of why they're not lying, but it still comes out that they're lying.
or wrong in some way. But I mean, I just think that there's, at some point, you've got to look at the person who's saying it. And if the person who's saying it is articulate enough, I got to think that, in the back of your mind, you must be thinking at some point, hey, I bet Jeff probably already thought of sleep paralysis. I bet Jeff probably already thought maybe it was lucid dreaming at some point. I bet he's run through the litany of stuff and it ain't that. Right. We've got a real mystery on our hands.
I don't know. I don't know that you're going to get that.
Well, I mean, we have. That's the thing. That's the thing that bothers me about, whenever you start talking to somebody who doesn't know this stuff about your life, and they're like, well, have you ever thought that maybe it could have been dreams? It's like, no, right. Dude, I'm 36. Never thought of that. Not a day in my life. Are you fucking high?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, like I said, interesting dynamic. I don't know where to go with it. I don't argue with them. I don't find it to be a productive, occupation of time to argue with a skeptic about this stuff. I'm over that. It's kind of like I've said about UFOs or so 2 minutes ago. So is arguing with skeptics. It's
but I would like to ask Shermer or one of those guys what it is about this that attracts them.
Well, Derek Bartholomew is a friend of mine, IAG West. So, hey to him in this thing. And he's, of course, a member of an organization that's associated with James Randi and all that. And Derek and I work together on some of the, well, shall we say, floppy UFO cases. And
he's a new breed of skeptic who, can tolerate a guy like you.
Yeah, I guess that's it, I guess when we have a common foe of sorts, I guess that works. But I think that what I get from him and what I've gotten from him before in phone conversations and emails is that I think he feels a very genuine sense that when he tackles some kind of thing like some fake psychic that is demonstrably fake, and here you can show why. And Derek's very methodical about laying all the evidence out for people and saying, look, I'm not saying one way or the other, but here is the data as it sits. Now, you can make up your mind from here, and it's pretty obvious how to make your mind up from some of the things that he's tackled. I think for him, he feels a genuine need to educate. I mean, one of his big things is this Jenny McCarthy immunization. Her child apparently developed autism after being immunized, and now she's very against immunizations of some sort. And I don't know what all that's about. I'm not. I just caught the periphery of that, but he sees that there could be serious problems with children being vaccinated for routine things, and parents being afraid to get their children vaccinated. I know that was one of the things I think he brought up one time. I may be wrong, but either way you cut it, he feels a genuine responsibility to people to educate. And that I can respect. I mean, that I can get behind that. But I don't think that is representative of most skeptics, I hate to say. I really don't. I think just by body language and facial expression and the words, of course, it seems like it's something, I don't know, it seems like it's something elitist, and it's something that's self-serving to them rather than some, I'm doing a service here, It's like, what do you care if anybody believes in flying saucers? So what? How does that affect your reality? It doesn't. So what do you care? Leave us alone. But like I say, to argue with a skeptic is, in my opinion, these days is just it's an absolute waste of time. So why bother? Why bother? I'd rather argue with a hypnotherapist or a neurologist or somebody like that. I'd rather have a discussion with them about the whats and the whys than a skeptic.
The end.
So many thanks to our guest, right?
Yeah, many thanks to Chris for coming on the show, and especially I met him at the Harvard meetup, and there was a lot of people didn't really want to come forward with their experiences, and he was a little hesitant, but he came on the show, man, and I think that's great. I think it's great that people are willing to step forward, and here's a guy with a real career to put on the line, not some schmuck like me.
Well, and let's also acknowledge that his experiences, I think, would be considered very on the edge for a lot of people, considering the state that he's in when he experiences these things. I mean, I got to say, for me, that while I found it interesting, I'm still much more compelled by those people who remember things outright from a not a sleep state. I'm not marginalizing his experiences by any stretch, but just for my own personal value, I guess you could say, I tend to appreciate the conscious or the awake state experiences that they recall. I find those more interesting, but this was certainly a lot different angle for me, at least, and I found it interesting. So
why do you find them more interesting? Yeah.
I don't know. I think that the level of suggestibility in a sleep state or a dream state is more, and just because of my own experiences and I have had some that have been in a dream state where and I think you've talked about this before, where you felt that like something doesn't belong in the dream. It's like you're having a dream and then all of a sudden this walks in. We talked about this way back, episode 2, I had that really strange dream. Mm-hmm. You have to wonder, is something standing beside your bed while you're having this dream and putting these things into your mind? Again, the experience with his daughter seeing the light by the tree, his experience in the lucid dream state of seeing this craft by the tree, I find that significant. I find that correlation between the two seems to support his lucid dream experience, but I would still find his daughter's experience more interesting to me. That's just personal preference. It's just, I think the suggestibility, the interpretation of the mind, and how those scenes play out in that kind of state, I find more interesting if you're in an awake state and you see something like that and what happens then, regardless of the fact that these beings seem to be able to affect your perception in pretty large ways. I don't know. I just find them more compelling to me. But this was still very interesting.
Well, I found it interesting in that I guess when he started talking about the dream stuff, I expected, like, where my prejudice goes to is toward some of my friends who cannot differentiate between dream and not dream. So if they have an alien-esque dream, they'll just assume, they won't differentiate. Oh, yeah, I saw aliens, or, oh, yeah, there are several races. And it's like, I've heard this before. It's like, oh, really? Well, what was your experience? And they'll relate a dream. And I'm like, well, okay, that's a dream.
That's a dream, right? Exactly.
We've all had that. I mean, I don't include those. But this was not that to me. And like you said, the sort of proof of it, or whatever, the external reality of it, came with his daughter sighting, and also the fact that, he ultimately ends up building this machine with 2 other people who are in this shared dream experience, apparently. So, and then also, of course, I hearken back to my own having just been healed recently in a dream, having something seemingly walk into the dream. Now, whether someone was standing by my bed or whatever, I mean, to me is irrelevant, because I've got to assume that there's that even if it's in the dream, there's an external reality. In other words, whatever that thing is in the dream, the person, the being, isn't me, isn't a projection of my unconscious mind, whether he's standing there or in, standing with the Plagiarians.
Well, Jesus. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that, listeners. No, I mean, don't you liken it? I mean, for me, I liken it kind of to being asleep in the fart chair in my living room. And there it is. And excuse me, I had a dream the other night where I was at my mom's house and she had the TV on and, I don't know, some random infomercial was on TV. And in my dream, that infomercial was playing out as if we were sitting in an audience watching this, but it was playing on TV. It's kind of like that. It's like that feedback. Again, it's coming out of the TV, it's running through your head, and and you're dreaming about it at the same time. That's kind of how I think about some of these experiences that are too far to dismiss as dreams, but yet not quite real enough to call an alien experience per se, in the classic sense of, oh, I'm awake. I must be awake. Is that what you mean? I'm awake. That's what I'm talking about. So, I wonder about that kind of stuff. It certainly makes you think.
Yeah. Well, I feel fortunate, and I think I said this in my book too. I feel like I'm fortunate in that I've had waking up and hallucinating that my mom was coming in to say goodbye while she went to work. So I've had that waking hallucination. I've had a lot of lucid dreams. I've had regular dreams. I remember my dreams really well, normally, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like I've had and now, of course, doing shrooms for this show, geez. Add that to the mix. I mean, I feel like I've had a good number of altered states of consciousness, whether awake or asleep.
Sure.
That I feel like I'm qualified to be able to differentiate.
Oh, yeah.
In a way that a lot of people aren't. And I would think that a lot of people, if they haven't had lucid dreams and were to have one, would believe that they were having an out-of-body experience or that they were having some sort of real thing, and they'd be wrong.
Right.
I don't get that sense listening to him. I get the sense that he really is going through this hyper-real stuff.
Yeah, in some way, yeah.
So that's my professional judgment.
Thanks for that.
That's right. I'm the Michael Shermer of ufology.
Jackass.